Hello, I'm Pierre Shostal. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer, and I served in Europe and in Africa. And the story I want to tell you about today is about another Foreign Service officer, a very distinguished one, Ambassador Frank Carlucci. Now, I was serving as a political officer at our mission to NATO in Brussels in the mid-70s. And at that time, there was a lot of concern at NATO about what was happening in Southern Europe. It was called the Southern Flank. And there was a strong feeling that the Southern Flank was crumbling. For example, in Italy, the Communist Party was working on a cooperation agreement with the then dominant Christian Democratic Party, something that very much worried Washington. Then also in Spain, in 1975, the dictator, Franco, died, and Spain faced a very uncertain future. There had been a powerful Communist Party in Spain before World War II. It had gone underground during Franco's reign, and the fear was that it would reemerge and perhaps capture power in that country. And finally, in Portugal, where Carlucci was our ambassador, there had been a coup in 1974 overthrowing a long-time right-wing dictatorship, which had been supported by the military, the Portuguese military. Now, that also ushered in a period of uncertainty and concern in Washington. The immediate response from the United States was a policy that was instituted by then Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. And Kissinger's view was that the way to handle Portugal was to isolate it, to deny it, for example, sensitive NATO intelligence information, to prevent the Portuguese military from participation in NATO military exercises, that kind of thing. And he hoped thereby to keep any damage that Portugal could do to a minimum. There was a danger in that, though, because if you abandoned Portugal, that would mean giving up potentially a very sensitive and important naval base that was a kind of maritime listening post on the Atlantic. Well, Ambassador Carlucci thought that this policy was wrong and short-sighted. And after establishing a lot of contacts in Portugal, and because he spoke excellent Portuguese, he came to the conclusion that there were elements in Portugal that we could work with and thereby save Portugal for NATO. There were moderate military officers as well as a outstanding Portuguese politician named Mário Soares, who he worked with and came to the conclusion that he could put together a package that would support the moderate elements in Portugal, a package primarily of reorienting the Portuguese military away from its traditional kind of repressive domestic role into a real NATO functioning body. And I was at NATO, as I said, at that time, and when Frank came to NATO, we helped him put together a package of steps that we could take to try to professionalize the Portuguese military and support the moderate elements in Portugal. Frank then flew to Washington, and what he did was to make contact with people that he knew in the National Security Council staff and explained his program to them and convinced them to recommend to President Ford at that time to support his own package, which they did. And so, in effect, what the White House did was to overrule the very formidable Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. And I understand that Kissinger was very, very mad about this. Well, as it turned out, Frank's program succeeded marvelously. We were able to get a much more secure and stable situation in Portugal. It became a strong democracy, and its military has contributed over the years to significant military activities in NATO. So all in all, I think that that's an example of real diplomatic courage. I think there are a few lessons that we can take from this story. One of them is that if you, as a foreign policy person, are convinced that your view is correct and you can back this up with solid arguments and fact-based information, it's kind of your moral duty to go up against an existing policy, even if it's held by people in very high places. Second, I think it's extremely important, if you're going to succeed in an effort like that, to have allies, so that you have support, not just yourself. You're not just a lone voice crying in the wilderness, but that your views are endorsed by other people who are respected. Third, I think that what is also very important is that, and I think that the Portugal case really shows this, that you combine military and diplomatic and political initiatives together in a package. And that's much more sustainable than what has happened frequently in our case of taking just military action, which doesn't always turn out so well. So I think for all these reasons, the life and career of Frank Carlucci is one that should definitely be studied and reflected on as we move forward as a country. Thank you.